Today I'm going to demonstrate how to wedge clay. Wedging clay is very important because it takes any air bubbles that are in your clay, gets rid of those, and it will make your clay homogeneous, which just means that it's the same consistency throughout. I'm starting off with some new clay out of the bag, which is in the plastic state, so it's very easily moldable. It's already homogeneous. It's already been pre-wedged by machine. But as we go through our unit, you'll start with this clay for your first part of your project, and then we'll be using scraps that will have to be wedged together again. So it'll be very important to wedge it properly. If you wedge incorrectly, you can actually add more air into your clay, and again, when you put it in the kiln, that would cause your piece to explode in the kiln, which is not something that we want to happen. So when you start with wedging the clay, you're going to roll the clay towards you, and what's really important in rolling the clay towards yourself is that you keep your thumbs behind the clay. If you have them in front of the clay like this, you will end up poking holes into the clay that will cause air bubbles to form, and you'll actually be adding more air bubbles into your clay instead of less. So I'm keeping my thumbs behind and I roll it towards me, and then the next step is to stack your hands one on top of the other and make sure your fingers are pointed upwards at about a 45-degree angle. You should always stand up while you're wedging. That way you can use your body weight. It'll help you get the right angle and your arms will not get as tired. So I'm going to lean in to the clay, and what's going to end up happening is that the part that's further away from me will be higher up and the part that is closer to me will be lower down. So see the angle here where it's higher and it gets lower. Then I roll it towards myself again, thumbs back, they're not in front of the clay. Stack your hands, lean in. It should be higher away from you and lower down close to you. And we're going to repeat this a few more times. And you will see that it starts to become a long piece. When it becomes a long piece, it's time to flip the clay the other direction. And again, I'm rolling it and I'm making sure my thumbs stay behind the clay, not in front of it. I stack my hands and I lean forward so that the clay again is higher, farther away from me, and lower down, closer towards me. Again, this technique is called the ram's head method, and the reason that we call it the ram's head method is because as you're doing this, it's going to spiral on the sides, and that's like the ram horn, and then a lot of people think that the front that's smushed down looks a little bit like the face of the ram. It's again very abstracted, but that's where the name comes from. So again, keeping the thumbs behind the clay, roll it towards you, hands stacked, fingers up at a 45-degree angle, lean into the clay, really use your body weight, and you can rotate it anytime it's starting to get a little bit too skinny. When you are about ready to stop, when you think your clay is wedged, it's better to stop when it is not at a long, thin stretch of clay. Instead, if it's a little more compact, that works a little bit better. And then the next thing that you'll want to do is block off your clay. And what you would do is where the spirals are, you tap those out first. So just tap the spirals out on the table. Don't hit too hard. And then just kind of rotate the clay until it becomes cube shaped or like a rectangular prism. When you're first starting to wedge clay, you might want to check to see if you wedged it properly. After you get used to this technique and you're confident that you're doing it correctly, you do not need to check it every time. But to check it, we're going to take a wire tool and we're just going to slice the clay in half. And if it is smooth like this, where there's no little pockets, then you have done it correctly. And I'll post some pictures of clay along with this video that show ones that have air bubbles in it so that you can see what that will look like as well. Another thing to keep in mind while you are wedging clay is that the canvas will be pulling some water out of the clay. So if your clay is too wet, you can dry it out that way. But if you are working with clay and your clay is a little bit too dry, you can actually add some water into the clay as well. I can wedge it like normal, so I'm rolling with my thumbs behind, stacking my hands, leaning into the clay, and then I can just spread a little bit of water on top of the clay, and I continue to roll with thumbs back, press in, roll with hands back. This clay is not very dry, so I really don't need to keep adding more water, but if it was extra dry, every time that I roll and then I lean in, after I've leaned in, I could spread some more water on, roll, press, spread a little bit more water on, and continue until my clay is moist enough to use again. So just one more time, just because it's good to hear this several times. Roll with your thumbs behind the clay, hands stacked, fingers 45-degree angle up, lean into the clay, roll forward with the thumbs behind, lean into the clay, roll forward. When you're done wedging, knock the spirals out first. And then tap your clay into the cube. Now your clay is ready for the next step, and we'll continue in another video.